What's going on, everybody? I appreciate you being here. And yeah, so we're just going to break down some images. We're just going to have a little chat. So if you have any questions, you want to ask anything at all, do anything like that, drop that in the chat. I think I have it set to you have to subscribe. So, subscribe and then you can leave a chat. But yeah, so we're just going to talk about this image here that we shot over in Las Vegas. And this was George Schroeder. So he's a model based out of New York. He flew out to Vegas, and this was obviously a composite. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about just my thought process behind why I chose to use create a composite versus, just shooting the normal studio style stuff. So this image actually came from kind of showcasing different focal lengths in a portrait. And obviously at different focal lengths, if you keep the same crop, it's going to affect the background a bit, right? So in this case, this was shot at 24 millimeters, which I normally wouldn't shoot a portrait at. But because of that, and I kept the same kind of crop as I did at the 60 millimeter, because I was using a 24 to 60 lens, it basically shrunk the background. So the white background that we had, because really the initial shot was I kind of wanted a very, let's pull this. This was kind of the idea of what I wanted the images to look like. So it was more of a very high contrast white background. I intended to shoot it black and white, but a very kind of contrasty look there. So obviously that is a personal style that I was going for. You can like it or not. That's up to you. But this was kind of the look we wanted. And this was shot at 60 millimeters. You can obviously see that. But when I moved it to 24 mil, obviously he started extending a little bit beyond the background. So the issue that we had there was, okay, great. So I'm going to have to do something with it anyway. And I was like, you know what? Let's just pull it into Photoshop, see what we can do, see if we can get something that looks somewhat realistic. Now, I did get a few comments about how the composite obviously is lit because the light is behind him, and then we have, basically we have a catch light in his eyes. So that could be a couple things. It could be lit with a studio light like it actually was, or there could be kind of like a hole in the wall in front of him, or he could be kind of in more of a tunnel. Obviously, with the light being a little bit more directional, we have, it's going to be a smaller light source, which it was. I think it was a 12-inch Magnum Reflector, something like that. And we'll pop over into set.a.light 3D here in a little bit and kind of show you the how I lit it. But it was very simple. I was trying to keep the demo very simple. The title of the demo was, images that, portraits that pack a punch, I think. And I kind of just wanted to play around with a really high contrast imagery. So anyway, so the purpose behind why I chose to shoot the composite, obviously it was kind of due to the fact that I was going to have to tweak the background a little bit because the focal length I shot, he was extending beyond that background already. So I could either make it all white, play around with it with that, or just bring it into Photoshop and we could, just play around with it and have some fun. Obviously with the, using the softbox as the background there, we were getting some edge light there, which played into there's like a cave opening or something like that. So you've got light coming in from behind, which makes it a little bit more believable. Now, I'm not a huge fan of composites all the time, if I'm being honest, but they do kind of, the light has to work. And in this case, there's some artificial light coming from the front, because if it wasn't, then it would be a complete silhouette, which, could look cool, but I wanted to see his beautiful face a little bit. But having that light coming in from behind made it a little bit more believable, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and pop over to Photoshop and just show you what we had there. So we are in Photoshop here. So obviously this is the composite that's done. So I'll just kind of go through my whole thought process here. So I don't normally bring things to Photoshop if I don't have to, but in this case, I was like, I know I want to swap the background out just for fun, see how it looks. And, in this case, I was like, okay, I kind of wanted it just to be a background, kind of like a canvasy, maybe like a concrete wall or something. So initially, I prompted it with, and I don't think you can really see this, but it says dark concrete with earth tones. And this is what it came up with. So it looked okay. It wasn't really great, but it did there was a couple other, variations of it. This one looks all right. I think it's, I don't really know what it is, but it kind of gave me the idea of like, oh, okay. Like I kind of like the tunnel idea, but I think what he's wearing makes more sense to basically have it more, in a natural setting. So I prompted it with, and this one looks absolutely terrible. I prompted it with dark stone tunnel or cave with light at the end of it with something or whatever it said, but it was a little bit more, I don't know. I think that looks terrible. So it looks like a cartoon. So I was like, but I do kind of like that idea. So then I brought it into the final one, and I said, stone cave with opening behind the subject. I made it very simple. The other one was really, really, I even put like the focal length in there just to try and keep it similar, but it didn't really look very good. So I moved away from that very quickly, and this is kind of what we ended up with. It gave me a few different variations of it, all kind of relatively the same. But I like the first one that it spit out, honestly. So we went with that one. But the issue that I was having with it was, and you can kind of see this down here, when Photoshop creates a background, when you say generate background, it doesn't generate the entire background. It basically creates a mask around it. And if you don't have the mask, your subject masked out perfectly, it's going to end up being a little bit, I don't know, it's going to look a little fake around the edges. So what I did, and you can kind of see this, if I go into here and zoom in a little bit, it just doesn't really look very good. So what I ended up doing was I actually took the liquify tool and brought it into liquify and basically just brought in the edges kind of with the push left tool. So I just kind of pushed it in, and it made it a little bit better. And then on top of that, I also added a box blur just to kind of blur it out a little bit. So you can see it's very crisp up here in this edge. So I added a little bit of a box blur just to kind of, draw your attention kind of back into the subject. And that was okay. Obviously, there's a bit of a color shift. It didn't look, super great. But what I ended up wanting to do was I ended up bringing it back into Capture One, and we'll bring that one back up. So we're back into Capture One, and we now have the image brought in here. So that's where I finished it. So basically I finished it in Capture One. So if we bring up our adjustments here, you can see a few things that I did. So let's just turn all of these off. So first thing I did was I did a background mask, and I brightened it up just a touch, just to kind of, make it so it wasn't super contrasty. And then I'll finish most of my portraits with a clear contrast layer, and I'll bring it down to about 30%. That's just personal preference. And I will also usually do about 20% of silver rich grain. In this one, I actually did different grain. I did tubular grain because I kind of wanted it to have that filmy look. So I did tubular grain, and I did a little bit higher than 20% impact. So I did about 26%. That's kind of, you can kind of go, up or down. But that you can kind of see it in here. It kind of creates a little bit of grain in the, really in the background. You can see it on his face a little bit too, but it's really, really noticeable more in the background. And that just kind of helped. The quality wasn't great in the AI generated background, which they're not always. That just kind of helped me, kind of bring them closer together, because obviously the image I shot was very crisp. The background is going to have a little less detail. So by adding some grain, you can just, you can kind of increase the realism a little bit. But let's go back into the layers we had here. The next one I did was just a mask. I did the combination mask in Capture One. If I do there, you can kind of see I did a circular mask around his head, and then a bit of a kind of a gradient mask from the bottom corner up to the top, just to kind of allow me to play with just the bottom part of the frame. And in that one, I didn't really do anything except I reduced the clarity a bunch. Normally I wouldn't do that, but I did go ahead and reduce the clarity just to kind of, I wanted to draw the viewer into his face. So brought the clarity down a little bit, in just those areas, which worked okay. I kind of kept it up here. And then I added, which I don't normally do, I added another style, which was the built-in styles. I believe it was I don't remember which one it was, but I added it up here. It is the bright gold. And that just kind of gave us a little more of a warm tone, kind of brought everything up. And then finally, I did this last adjustment layer, which was just a little bit of a lower the contrast down on everything but his face. And one thing I didn't mention, on the background, I did the same thing, lowered the contrast a bit, but I also did some levels adjustment. But actually, no, I did the levels adjustment in Photoshop, which I don't know why, but I just did. So I did the levels adjustment inside of Photoshop and kind of adjusted the background a little bit just to kind of get the colors a little bit closer to where I want them to be. Because obviously when I had that generated background, it just kind of spit out whatever colors it wants. So I kind of had to do a little bit of a levels and curves adjustment just to kind of get it to a little bit more of a believable level. But anyway, so that is that whole image. Obviously, composites are interesting because you really want to make sure that when you're doing a composite, it works a lot better when you're actually shooting it with intention. If you go into it thinking, I want to shoot this as a composite, it's going to look a lot more real and it's going to look a lot better in the end than in this case, which it worked out okay. I think it was like 80% believable probably. But I kind of went into it as more of I didn't really have an option. I never intended to use the 24 millimeter image as my final shot, but it kind of worked in this case. So I kind of played around with that, and I went kind of reverse, where I did the composite out of necessity more than out of intention. So again, if you're going to do a composite, it works a lot better if you're going to do it on purpose. But yeah, so let's go ahead and look at some of the other shots that we did from this shoot here. So this was a demo I did for Adorama. I did it at the Adorama booth, and it was George came and he was all decked out into this cowboy outfit, and then I told him I'm only going to shoot headshot crop, so you don't need to have the chaps and the spurs and all that. But he looked great doing it. So in the final behind the scenes shot, you can kind of see it. You can see his whole thing there. But yeah, so let's go ahead and just jump to the very first image we shot. On this screen, it looks a little bit hot. I did meter this, and it metered just a touch hot. The lighting setup for this, the background that was provided was just a kind of brownish canvas kind of looking. You can see it better in this one. It kind of has this kind of earthy tone to it, which in a shot like this, you would kind of think like, oh, he's dressed as a cowboy. You go earthy tone, works great, and it can. but I kind of wanted to go a little bit different and go completely opposite in the contrast and shoot it on like a really stark white background. So we brought in a 4-foot Octa from Profoto. So I was shooting with two Profoto D30s, which are 500 watt second strobes. And I basically was like, I want to have just a white background because I think it'll look a little bit more interesting with the intention of me shooting it kind of black and white. So that is just the background light. So there's nothing else there. It actually looks pretty cool. I could kind of roll with that and just use that image. Now, one thing that you have to worry about when you're shooting in this style where you're using a softbox or an octabox or a light source behind you is, as your background, is that yes, it does create some rim lights, but it also is your background. And you want to kind of shoot it where it's the lowest power that it's pure white. So if you kind of come over here, you can see across the board up top here, if you look up on the top, wherever I go, it's 255 across the board on the RGB spectrum. That means it's pure white. If I lower, let's just go here and I lower the exposure. Now it's not pure white. You can see it's 173 across the board. So if you're shooting and you're tethering, which you definitely should be, go ahead and make sure that you have, if you want pure white, you want to make sure that it's going to be 255 across the board. You can kind of play with that creatively. If you don't want it to be pure white, don't make it 255. So this is just the image with just the background light, no key light whatsoever. And I think it looks pretty cool, and we could probably be done right there. Simplest shot ever, just softbox behind, wrap it around. But what I was saying was that if you wanted to use this, typically you want to go the lowest power, you get pure white. Obviously, the distance between your subject and your background is going to kind of play into that a little bit. But, this is kind of a good starting point. I did take a shot. Let me go ahead and jump back into here. So this is at pure, full power on a 500 watt second strobe. It looks absolutely terrible. And you don't want to do that, but that's what happens. Yes, it is pure white here. If we come across here, it is pure white, but you want to, again, shoot at the lowest power that you can get pure white. And that's going to get you're not going to have that wrap around where it's starting to really illuminate his face. Another thing we have here is this is completely lost data. Once it's pure white right here, that data can't come back, and that is, you don't want that. So we now have, so let's go back into the shots that we were doing on purpose here. So again, just that. Then we added our key light. And obviously with the Cowboy hat, with a smaller light source, we're shooting with I think a 12-inch kind of Magnum Reflector. You're going to start getting some shadow from the hat. So there's a couple ways you can deal with that. You can go ahead and bring the light physically down, not power down, but physically down. And that's going to kind of help with that. Because if you raise it up and angle it down, you're going to get shadows all up in this area here, which I think looks cool. It kind of adds some contrast to it. So this was kind of another shot, and we kind of just played with it from there. Again, my intention for this was to shoot it with this. So this is the final image of this shot here, but it basically is background extended a little bit in post-production, cleaned up, just minor retouch, and then thrown into black and white and kind of have it there. Again, I personally wanted this shot to be a little bit more of something you wouldn't really see, where it's like you have really, really bright background and a really high contrast, image. I don't really know what the intention of it was, but for me, with these demos, it's kind of interesting because I have the ability to kind of just shoot whatever I want. Obviously, if I'm shooting with a client, I'm going to want to shoot a little bit more intentionally based on their needs. And in this case, there might be a need for a shot like this, but for this time, it was just something I wanted to do. So as we kind of went, this again was the composite shot, and the what I was doing with this was I was actually showing different images at different focal lengths. So this is the image at 24 millimeters, and this is the image at 60 millimeters, and you can see the background essentially gets a lot wider when you keep that same crop at a wider focal length. Basically, your background's shrinking, to put it very simply. So we have that. And this was kind of the final image of that 60 mil. So this one he's looking straight at camera. I think it looks fantastic. We got a little bit of Rembrandt light coming around here. I just think it's it's just a cool looking shot, and you can, think whatever you want. I think it's cool, and that's what we're sticking with. So moving on, though, we had just a handful of other, kind of shots here. But I also went into this demo. I always love to kind of talk about, and this kind of plays into when you're shooting corporate headshots, or you're shooting something where you want to have kind of show authority or just kind of change the perspective. And this plays a lot if I'm shooting a corporate headshot for the CEO. You don't really want to shoot high to low. I think a lot of people have this idea that if you shoot high to low, you're going to get rid of, your double chin and all that stuff. But it's going to do something else, and it's going to give you a lot less authority in an image. So this is George shot from high to low. Obviously, the camera's looking down at him. If you think of any watch any movie, if someone's having, a confrontation, an argument, the person who's winning that argument is going to appear to be higher. So the camera angle is going to come, high to, low to high. In this case, he's shooting high to low. It doesn't give him as much authority. This is straight on, and this is low to high. With low to high, it makes him feel larger than life. So in this case, he's got this kind of rugged cowboy look. I would either shoot kind of eye level, or I'm going to shoot a little bit low to high because I think it's going to look a lot better and bring that image to life. So in this case, shooting it low to high just makes him seem larger than life, which I will use that for if I'm shooting, let's say, the CEO or something, of a company who is the boss and needs to be kind of, I don't want to say put on a pedestal, but you want him to seem larger than life. I will kind of shoot not this drastically, probably. I'll shoot just a little bit below eye level, looking up, and that's gonna help kind of give them that larger look. Not larger like wider, but make them seem bigger than they are. All right. So when we kind of were wrapping up this demo, we wanted to, meaning I wanted to kind of play around with this split look. I've done it before, but the thing is, we didn't have a V-flat for this. We didn't have a foam core. We didn't have a flag really at all. So what we did was we actually brought in I don't know what that was. I think it's like the outer covering of the of just a 5-in-1 reflector, and we just kind of draped it over a boom C-stand arm. So this is the key light I was using the whole time. It is a 12 or 14 inch Magnum Reflector with a 10-degree grid on there. The grid's gonna do a ton because I had the light really close to him. Even at like almost the lowest power without that grid, it's gonna probably overexpose him. And we're going to jump into set.a.light 3D here in a second and just kind of show you what it does, because the grid's going to do a couple things, especially a 10-degree grid. It's going to not only, lower the power, because you're physically putting something in front of that light, being the grid, but it's also going to narrow that spread of light as well. So let's go ahead and jump into set.a.light 3D, and I want to we'll build this split light effect and kind of, show you what that looks like. So we are here in set.a.light 3D. If you've not used this program, you need to check it out. And it's absolutely amazing, not only for just kind of doing stuff like this, like education, but it's really designed for pre-production for not only photo, but in the recent versions, video as well. They've added animation. You can do a bunch of different, cinema quality video effects, and you can animate the people. We're not going to get into that right now because that takes a long time to render and all that fun stuff. But what I want to do is I just want to kind of show you what it does for pre-production, or just kind of showcasing an image like this. So one cool thing about this is you can have a light meter inside of Set.a.light 3D. It does look like the largest light meter on the planet because it's about half the size of him, but it does the same thing as a light meter in general. So it's kind of cool. So you can kind of bring it around and you can set it to kind of point at any particular light. Obviously, I don't really need it to point at the background light. So I'm going to click this little eye here. So it's going to angle directly at that key light. And I've got my camera at 5.6. So you do have to kind of set it up like a light meter in real life, where you have to have the ISO, the shutter speed to match pretty close. The ISO has to match perfectly. The shutter speed can vary a little bit. But yeah, so I've got that set up and I've got my camera at 5.6 in here. Let's say we wanted it to be f4. If we have f4, that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to brighten the background light because basically that just brought the exposure of all my lights up. But now I would need to lower this because it's metered at 5.6. You can see that right here. So I would need to go down to f4 or thereabouts. We'll just say 4.0.1. That's darn close to f4. So we'll just keep it there. But yeah, so now we can hide that. When I hide the light meter, the meter is still technically there. Like you can see this meter reading. So if I adjust that, if I turn that light off, it's going to meter at nothing basically because it's only metering basically the light that wraps around. So you can have that and you can see it the whole time without the actual physical red ginormous meter in their face. So it's kind of a nice little feature to have if you want to get really precise with it. So right now we've got this light at, it's a little higher than him. It's at a 45-degree angle. We do have this Rembrandt lighting here. I built this. There is no cowboy outfit in this, but I found the closest thing, which kind of looks like a Jason Mraz fedora. But it will show us how to play around with how the light is affected with a hat. This is a very, very accurate program. My George model's accurate. It is pretty accurate, I will say. But yeah, so I made it as close as I could. I did the model. I didn't make him the old man model. I made him the normal guy, and I put a beard on him, and it looks just like him. So you can play around with the different models, all that stuff. I will do another video another day about how to use this program. There is a million things. Let's go ahead and build that that split light effect in this. So I just kind of want to show you how you can use it. Obviously I've shot the shot already, so this isn't really pre-production, but in this case, we're going to kind of play around with that. So we'll keep him the same. You can change the, where it's focusing on. I've got it focused on his eye. He's looking straight at the camera. I can angle his head down a little bit if I want, but I'm not going to. But what I want to do is I want to move this little light around, and because I want that split light effect. Right now we have Rembrandt. So let's go ahead and bring this light around. I do have it where it's not locked on him right now. If I click this little target, that's going to lock on to where it is, but it's not locked onto him. So that's kind of the problem. So I can click this little thing down here where it looks like a person inside of a square. That will basically focus the light on the subject. And then when I have this selected, it will then, as I move it around, it basically stays locked on him, which is really cool feature to have, but you don't always want it to be exactly where that is because it might, not be exactly where you want. You might want to feather the light a little bit. You might want to just kind of play around with that. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and kind of put it here. I do want to take my background light and I'm going to turn it off because I want to just see what that light is doing on the side and see where it's getting to be split light. So in this case, right here is pretty good. And you'll notice it's actually a little bit behind him. It's not, directly off to the side, because if it was directly off to the side, we're going to get a little bit more, it might start wrapping around him. Obviously, this light source is a little smaller, so that it's not going to wrap around quite as much. Whereas if you had a big softbox like this, the wraparound is going to be a little more drastic. So this is a good starting point. We see that it is just lighting up the side of his face. And I'm doing the same thing I do if I'm shooting in a normal, out in a studio, is I don't do all my lights on at one time. I'm going to single out my lights to make sure that they're doing exactly what each light needs to do. When if you turn all your lights on at one time and it doesn't look perfect, you're going to have to turn them all off anyway to make sure, just to kind of find where the issue is. So it's easier just to build them one at a time anyway. So in this case, we've got that one. Let's turn that one off. And now we have a blank screen, and we will turn this background light back on. So I'm also going to zoom in a little bit. I want it to be around 60 millimeters. So if we kind of go back to that, sorry, I'm really bad at multitasking. So when I'm moving things around and then I stop talking, it's because I can't do two things at one time. So me running the live stream and doing this and talking is, it's almost a miracle that anything's working out. So I'm going to bring this light over a little bit. I want to make sure that little check mark is, or the little target is off, because if I moved it and it was on, it would basically follow things around. So I don't want it to do that. I just want to kind of slide it over a little bit and center that up on him. Because you'll notice when I move that over, now I'm starting to get a little bit more, even rim light on this side as to where when it was over here, it's not quite there. So if I kind of center that up, and same thing, if you go around this way, you're going to get a lot more here and less on that side, which we might kind of play with based on the fact that I know I'm going to be covering up the left side of the frame with in real life, it was just basically a black piece of fabric that I draped over a C-stand. In this case, I can go ahead and bring in what's called a light blocker, and that is going to, essentially it's a V-flat. So we can kind of play with that. Let's go ahead and also, because I know I shot it like this in real life, I'm going to do a vertical crop on this one. So which means I'm going to have to move a couple things around, namely my camera, and kind of center that up. And let's bring this down just a little bit. I kind of want to crop the top of his hat off because I want to keep that really close crop. And the reason for that is I feel like if I had it higher, anything above his head, again, this is personal opinion, anything above his head is going to be a little distracting just because having that line there. So, and in real life, I didn't have a nice crisp line because if we look back at this, we don't have a nice even line. It's just a piece of fabric draped over, so it's not perfectly level. So I don't have the luxury of having that perfectly vertical line, right? So in my case, I cropped his head just a little bit, just to kind of get rid of that distraction. So this is the final image, but let's go ahead and finish building that up in Set.a.light 3D. So we've got kind of just that background light split in half. So now we can add in, and we like how that looks. We did cover up a fair amount of that light. So every time you throw a light blocker or a flag or anything in front of a light, you're going to you're blocking a lot of that light. So in this case, we blocked almost half the light. I'm not saying we need to bring up the light power, but in some cases you might be getting a lot less light hitting your subject. So you might need to bump that power up a little bit. So let's go ahead and just bump it up a teeny bit. Boom, there we go. But as we do that, we start to see a little bit of reflection kind of coming back, because this is a very accurate program and these walls are white, which means that light is bouncing here and bouncing off all these white walls and still illuminating him. So if I change the color of the walls, let's just do that real quick because we can. All right, so I changed the wall color to black. It's a lot less reflective. Obviously the ceiling, so if we do everything black, we're going to get a lot less reflection than if we had them where they were all white, which we'll just keep that because my studio in real life is white. And that's okay. It's not really a huge deal, but we will go ahead and add in this. We're going to go and add in that light again. And I do want to check the meter again, because the meter now is going to be metered at a different thing. Let me find it. So it's metered at 2.8.7, which is almost f4, which is good, but it's not pointing at the light. So I need this meter to point at said light. And now we're going to have it metered at f.4.1. So that's actually perfect. That's exactly where we need to deal with. All right. Question from Jean. Do you ever struggle with lens flare from the backlight, or do you usually keep it low enough or not visible? The flare is all going to depend on a couple things. You get flare from when light enters your lens, right? You're going to get a lot more flare from a really specular light source. Softboxes help with that, but they don't get rid of it altogether. And I did get some flare in some shots, and I'll show you those over in Capture One in a second. But basically, if you are, actually, we're talking about it now. Let's just talk about it now. So let's go ahead back into Capture One. And I think there's a couple images that I had flare, and I actually did it on purpose. So let's go ahead and boom, go here. All right, so we're in Capture One here. Let's go find an image with some flare, because it did come up, and I talked about it. I might need to, all right, let's do here. All right, so here are some, let's see. It's probably going to be hard to see on the stream that there's flare. You can kind of see it in, there's one. All right, so it's going to be hard to see. At the very top here, there's a little bit of flare. So in this case, I had basically the fabric just covering the middle part, and I lowered it a little bit. So basically it was basically like a hair light and two edge lights. In this case, you're getting a little bit of lens flare from the top, and that's because so I'm at, does it say what my focal length was? Of course it doesn't. But basically, I had the edge of where my crop was right at where the light was coming out. So it creates a kind of soft lens flare. Let me find another one that was a little bit more. There was one that was really drastic, I remember. You can kind of see it on the edge here. But yeah, so basically, if you zoom in a little bit, you're going to get less lens flare because you're not creeping all the way to the edges to where that light's actually coming into your lens. And then just using double diffusion, if you're using the softbox, that'll help a bit. But yeah, I've never really dealt with too much lens flare. Another thing too is you can angle your light instead of having it perfectly parallel to your subject up and down. You can angle it a little bit, either up or down. You'll still get the same effect, but you'll kind of help where that light is. Light is directional, right? So if your light's here, it's going to go here, which means it's going to go straight into your lens. If you angle it down a little bit, it's going to kind of go down a little bit, which your lens is here. So if you deal with that, that's just a couple ways you can kind of get rid of lens flare. So angle your light down a little bit and then just zoom in a teeny bit, and that should help get rid of everything. But let's finish this image over here in set.a.light. Pretty much done already now because I turned the light on and it looks great. So the concept behind this is basically split light. You've got a split, his face is split, and then the background's split, and it kind of creates this depth of checkerboard from back to front or front to back, however you're going to look at it. But yeah, so that was that. I don't really have a ton more here, but I want to kind of just go ahead and pop this little thing up onto the. All right, we're going to pop this little thing up onto there if you feel so inclined. You don't have to, but this does help me, and I can go ahead and create more content like this, and inevitably better content that's a little more planned out. And obviously, as we still do this, we build this up a little bit, we can go ahead and get more people on the stream, get more comments going, because the more involved the viewers are, the more I can kind of just that kind of helps steer the conversation. So if anybody has any questions or anything like that, definitely feel free to reach out. I would love to answer any questions you guys have. I'll keep this stream up after I do this, and so hopefully, if you're watching it after the fact, go ahead and drop a comment in there, and I'll try to get to it. And then I will kind of do some research on when another stream would be good, and I might do a poll over on Instagram and see what times work good for people. But yeah, I think this was fun. I would love to keep doing it. Yeah, and if you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. I'm going to go ahead and keep this stream going live after, or I'm going to end the stream, but then I'm going to go ahead and keep the video up. So if you have any questions, definitely leave those there. And but yeah, so again, thanks for having me, and we will see you another time.